Hello everybody, it is Marty McConnell, the Off-Grid Gecko. Today I'm going to be talking about curing meat a little bit. This is not meant to be an instructional video so much as for your own knowledge. The way that I'm doing this is not FDA approved, it's not USDA approved as far as I know. This is just my way of doing it. It's a very simple way of curing meat for storage, and now I can have meat around the house. I started with a 2-pound roast a couple weeks ago. This is pretty much all that's left of it. It dried out really fast using this method, and it's still nice and soft around the outside. So obviously I've managed to get around a couple things. I've spent a long time learning, reading. It's been several weeks of just absorbing all the information that I can, looking at online books, recipes, forum discussions, and everything else under the sun, watching some YouTube videos to make this sort of a possibility for me. And then I was like, let me try it out. Now, I have tried curing meat before. This is not something that's totally new to me, and I just want you to understand, if you're planning on getting into this, it's good to read, do your research, go ahead and buy some pink salt and just do things the best way that you have the money and the ability to do. You're going to want a cool environment for curing. So I've got about a 2.5-pound chunk of meat here. I asked the butcher specifically for something that didn't have a lot of fat on it, and he did not disappoint. So this is a pretty nice little steak I've got here. Eye of round roast. Now this guy's still cool because even though it's a long trip home, I got some frozen suet today as well. I'm going to be doing another video on that hopefully. So this is about a $17–18 chunk of meat, and wrapped in true butcher style in freaking butcher paper instead of plastic, even though they put it in a plastic bag. But you know, I'm not gonna sit here and raise too much fuss about that. It smells freaking wonderful. Yeah, that's a pretty big steak. Let's see if I can get you on there for the camera. Boop. That's a pretty big chunk of meat. And this is beef. It almost looks like pork. I mean, it's a really light colored pink, and I expect this is what good meat should look like versus the crap that I normally get from the supermarket. Really nice looking meat, really fresh, and it is already at a cool temperature. This has not, to my knowledge, been totally frozen. It may have been at some point in its life, but as you can see, it's also very wet, so this is going to be kind of a messy process. If you're planning on doing this, like, be prepared to get a little messy. Now, the way I do my meat, I need a whole chunk like this. Ground meat is not going to work for me because I am planning on curing this, and so anything you can do to stop little packets of bacteria on the interior of the meat is good. So a whole chunk. There are some deep little scores in here too, so I'm going to have to be extra careful and pack those with lots of salt, because you want the salt to penetrate in, and this is a perfect place for bacteria to get trapped. So any kind of little cuts or scores in the meat, you want to pack it as good as you can with salt. This has a minimal amount of fat on it, which is also good because that fat is going to take longer to dry out. Therefore, you're going to have a moist area in the meat. It wasn't really a problem with my little ground chuck that I tried a couple weeks ago, but you know, the least amount of fat possible. That's pretty much what I told the butcher. I was like, I just want a really lean piece of beef, and this is what he gave me. So I have round roast. The first thing we need to do is get the cure into this meat quickly, so that it can start, that salt can start to suck the moisture out of the middle of the meat, and then we'll get on to the rest. So I'm going to go ahead and readjust the camera, and then we will work through salting the meat. Alright, so when you get into curing meat, when you even start looking at it, it's an egg, there's going to be all this discussion about nitrates. From what I've been able to actually find, I haven't found any kind of scientific literature that specifically tests nitrates on botulism versus where there'll be less or where there'll be more. If you know of a journal article that you want to link to in a comment, I'd be more than happy to read it. I want to see how they did their test and what they did. But for the moment, I'm kind of anti-nitrate. I mean, to me, you're trading a very, very low chance of botulism for, you know, bowel cancer. Neither of those claims is proven, but as far as I can see, as far as I've read on the subject anyways. But basically, you want to get salt on this guy as fast as possible, but what you want to do before you get the salt on it, and I learned this kind of the hard way, is I'm going to go ahead and rinse this meat completely off. I'm going to wash it in the sink, just to make sure that if there are any little insect eggs or anything on the outside of the meat, you may think that's kind of gross, but it happens. Okay, this is real life. This is not fantasy land, where you bring this home and cook it right away and you just don't notice that there's larvae in it because you never see them. There are insects that attack just about any kind of meat that you're going to get a hold of, so that is a thing. And I don't see this step a lot, but this is my thing for insects. So first of all, non-ground meat, this is a whole chunk, and I'm going to wash it off just so that if there is any little bugs or larvae or anything on it, all I see is some little black spots here and there. Nothing that strikes me as an infestation of any kind, so that's something you want to look for. And if you do see an infestation of any kind on your meat, like, definitely don't use it for curing. Just cut that up and cook it right away, or whatever you're going to do. But you definitely don't want to cure it if there's a high density of bug population on it. A couple maggots isn't going to kill you and you'll never notice. You probably eat about 2 pounds of them a year and you never notice. But so we're just going to give this guy a rinse, basically, and wash some of this outside scum off and all the sticky parts. And of course, if you're in a shit hit the fan environment or scenario, you probably want to do this in a clean stream or something. Just wash the meat off, and that'll actually help cool it down too if it's really fresh, like right off the animal. I'm going to dry this little booger off a little bit. Now remember, our goal here is to get all the liquid out of this meat as fast as we possibly can, and we need to keep track of how much liquid is actually in the meat. So the first thing we're going to do here is weigh this guy. So I got my little scale over here. I'm going to go ahead and check the weight and then mark it down on something so I don't forget. 2 pounds and 8 ounces. Let me get some more of this fat off here. Any of this fat that'll peel right off, go ahead and just yank that off, because you don't really want that. You don't need it for anything, and you don't really want it, and it gets in the way. So the next thing I'm going to do is rub this. Now back to the nitrates thing. You can add nitrate salt. You can not add nitrate salt. I'm going to leave that up to you. You're a human being. You can make your own decisions on that, but there are other ways to get nitrates in the meat, and some of them are quite unexpected to most of us. So I've got my little cure here from the last batch, whatever's left of it, because I keep putting this on the meat as I cut pieces off. And basically what I like to use is paprika, because I think it tastes delicious. So I'm just going to take some paprika, dump it in my bowl here. And I'm going to take some salt. So I do about half and half paprika and salt, in case you're wondering. I'm not really using a measuring cup or anything. It's not rocket science, but it looks more or less like that when you mix it up. Now paprika does have some nitrates in it, so this isn't totally nitrate free. That actually surprised me. But I'm going to put this on first, and then those nitrates will be part of the cure to go into this. So you start by sprinkling a little on there, and then just rub that sucker in. And if you're using paprika, your hands are going to turn bright red. So be ready for that. Just pack it into that little groove. Like I said, salt the hell out of that little piece, just to make sure that nothing can get in there or grow in there or anything like that. Pat that guy down, And I like putting again, I learned this the hard way. I started putting the salt mix on first, or the paprika on first, so that it can actually penetrate the meat a little bit better while it's moist. So the water that's carrying the salt inside and the salt that's bringing the water out, that paprika will get mixed into that that whole little process. And just rub him down real good and make sure he's nice and salty. Salty dog. Okay. Some more of the salt up in here. And just rub it over every little pink part. And then any little cracks, crevices, or anything else that you see, you definitely want to pack that in there too. So I've got some little end grain cuts here that could use a little extra salt in them. You don't want to give any spot for anything to attack this from the outside, because that could lead to problems. Now we're going to be curing in an air environment also, so there's a couple things that go into botulism. Botulism needs a anaerobic environment to thrive, so, and the spore has to be present, obviously. So the interior of a chunk of meat should not have botulism in it, but botulism's kind of an everywhere sort of thing, so those little spores are going to be on the outside of your meat. Just assume that they're there. Botulism lives in the dirt, and it just has a way of getting onto everything that you touch and everything that you look at, or anything set out in the air. So just always assume that botulism's there. It's not going away. There's nothing you could do about it, so just got to do the best job we can. Because of that, that's why I like using a whole chunk of meat like this rather than something that's ground up, because there's not going to be any botulism inside the meat, you know, where the moisture is. So basically what we're trying to do is kill off everything that's on the surface first, and then we'll work our way to the inside. So the next step in this process is to totally salt this guy and let it cure. I haven't figured out a really good way to do this yet, because you need something for the excess moisture to drip into, which I don't have. So my strategy instead is we take our little bowl of spice mix here, and I've still got a lot of stuff in the bottom, and I'm just gonna basically fill this up with salt, put the meat in there, and then cover the meat completely in salt. But I want a good layer on the bottom of salt, and I would use a different bowl, but right now my bowl's over there being used to make potash. So I'm gonna get a nice thick bed of salt down in there in the bottom, and this way any of the juices that come out of the meat can all settle to the bottom, and they'll be separated from the meat by that salt. And I'm just going to kind of squish him a little bit and pack him in here. And I'm going to make sure that this guy is completely covered in regular salt. So my spice is already in there. I'm just using paprika, but I want totally covered in salt. And I'm using just plain salt with no iodine in it. Sea salt will actually have a couple little nitrates in there as well. Some sea salts, depends on where they get it from. So there he is, like a snow-covered little mountain of salt. So obviously throwing all this away would be pretty wasteful. I mean, it's like $2, $3 worth of salt for a $20 piece of meat. Might sound like a good deal in theory, but overall I don't think that's good. And I'm just going to set him up here to basically dry out, cure, let all those liquids sort of drain to the bottom. And the amount of time that this takes is variable. Okay, so the last piece was actually smaller than this. I cured it for like 24 hours. Came out pretty salty, but I was a little nervous about it. I'm probably going to let this sit all day and all night as well. So I'm going to throw usually a piece of plastic or something over the top, just to where the bugs, like if there are any bugs, the spiders pretty much take care of most of the flying insects, but just to make sure nothing gets in there and starts laying eggs on the meat, I'm just going to cover it, and we're going to let that set up and cure. The main differences in this recipe, I'll go ahead and get to it right now. I am drying in a higher temperature than expected, probably a lower humidity than expected. I'm using just salt and whatever nitrates are in that paprika, so I'm not measuring out and using nitrates. I'm not doing an equilibrium cure. I don't know what the exact parts per million is going to come out to be, but it's probably going to be a small amount of nitrates. Good morning, everybody. Rise and shine. Time to finish some meat. So this is our meat that was curing yesterday. Got everything nice and lovely in there. I noticed after I put it in there that I didn't have any salt around that edge, but I think that'll be okay. And you'll notice it's kind of dark in the bottom here, and we had just filled this up with salt, or I just filled this up with salt. So that's the liquid and stuff that's draining off. This actually smells a lot nicer than last time, probably because I added, because I allowed that liquid to drain off rather than sit there and like pool up next to the meat. So that's a good thing. I'm going to figure out some way. Probably if I do a lot, I'll take a 5-gallon bucket and put some wood down in the bottom to get it off the ground, fill it up with salt, and then start stacking meat on top of it that way. And apparently my camera didn't charge up at all, having it on the charger, so cable's going off of here. Oh, there she goes. Come on, you big fella. Ooh wee. Alright. Shake some of the salt off of it, because it's sort of briny and liquidy. And kind of straighten it. So I can already tell this is dried out a little bit, just by holding it. So I'm just kind of, but it's still very pliable, so I can kind of push it back into shape. The meat started to color a little on the outside. And you really don't need to do too much with it. Now, last time I went ahead and washed the salt off because it was kind of wet, but this is all the wetness is down there in the bottom in the salt, so no worries there. I'm planning to start reusing salt because this is just, classically this would have been incredibly wasteful to do it with brand new fresh salt every time unless you live right next to the ocean. Salt's kind of an expensive commodity. A little bit of wetness over here, that's okay. That's on the skinny end, and that end will get wrapped. So there's our meat. We're going to go ahead and take them over here and weigh them. And we were at 2 pounds and 8 ounces yesterday. We're now at 2 pounds and 6 ounces. Now this is including water loss and addition of salt. So take that into account. Like I probably lost a hell of a lot more water than that during this little process. But we're going to go with that. So now I'm going to wash my hands. I'm going to prepare some muslin. Now with the muslin, you just want a clean piece of cloth basically. And this is going to keep the bugs from getting to the meat. It'll trap in the moisture a little better. It'll cool it off a little bit. So I'm just going to try and figure out about how much I need. Don't need very much. Just enough to get a good wrap on there. And then we'll roll them up like a burrito. And I'm just going to lay this down like this. And take our meat. Sit him on there. We'll just roll them up like a burrito. So basically wrap the muslin around like that. And tuck in the ends here. And then the muslin's going to color as you're doing this as well. And that just sort of, it's like putting something in the crisper in the fridge. Grab some twine. I need to hurry. Now I've got kind of this thicker type of string here. It's not really thread, it's just a thicker string. And I'm going to start at the bottom. And we'll just wrap this, and you can see that moisture is already starting to come through. Wrap this and tie a little clove hitch or something here. As tight as we can get it anyways. And then I'm going to wrap it. And I'm not super concerned with everything being exactly perfect. But you do want to wrap this up pretty tight so it holds its shape and it'll make it kind of more round. Far in, we'll do another loop. Ooh, I could make it a lot prettier, but like I said, who gives a shit? Okay. Now, remember the objective here is to get the meat wrapped, not to make this look pretty per se. You can, but it's not 100% necessary. And then I'm going to try and leave just enough thread at the top here to hook this onto something. Ready? And there you go. Now we got a string we can hang it from. So I'm just going to loop this over the top, tie another knot, like a double knot or something, and we'll be good to go at that point. And then we've got a little string we can support this by, so I can hang this on something over here. And I like to hang it over the sink because even though we cured this already, it's still got a lot of moisture in it and it's going to want to drip. So this way it can drip into the sink. So I've got some little hooky things here on my shelves, and I'll just hang that on one of them. And then she's ready to go. That simple. That's how I did it last time anyways. Of course, this is sort of experimental, so we do need to check it from time to time just to make sure. Just loop this thread so it's out of the way. And I need to put a tag on this so that I'll remember how much the weight was, because it's going to be like a week or two before it cures out, at least maybe up to 4 or 5 weeks. And so I'm just going to cut me off a piece of paper, put a little tag on there with the weight and the date, and basically that's it. That guy's done. So the next video I'm going to be doing is going to be on suet, which I have a bunch of it back here behind me. It's this stuff. It's kind of a soapy, hard fat. So with any luck, I'll have plenty of suet left over when this guy's ready. And if I end up accumulating enough meat, I may be doing a video on pemmican at some time in the future. So that'll be cool. So stay tuned for that. That's it for this video. Just hang it, dry it. If something starts to smell really off, like you may detect a little hint of like a cheesy odor, is what I call it. I don't know what anybody else would interpret it as, but that seems to be normal and fine. But if there's an off odor or a rancid odor or whatever, anything questionable, just chuck it. You know, a $20 hunk of meat is not worth your life. So do whatever you can to make sure. Now, having a good humidity level or a cool temperature, like it's really cool in the house this morning because it got extremely cold outside last night, so this is a good time to set this up. But as it continues to cure and dry out, like it's not going to matter as much, I don't think. And that's counterpoint to what experts will tell you. But cool, dry, or cool place, decent amount of humidity is good, but again, we've got it wrapped, so that's going to help hold some of that moisture in as well too, so it'll dry out a little slower. If you were to hang just the meat in your house like this, you'd probably be asking for a recipe for disaster, so I definitely recommend wrapping it at the very least. Anyways, that's it for the video. I'm going to see if I can charge this camera up and then get on with the next thing I've got to do, so I will talk to you guys later. Have a good one. Drop a comment below if you have any questions or anything you want to say or whatever. I will be around looking at them, and I will be answering comments. So no worries there. You guys stay safe out there.